Everybody, this is Hondo Carpenter, your Las Vegas Raiders beat writer, and of course, the host for Sports Illustrated and the host of the Las Vegas Raiders Insider podcast, joined now by my assistant beat writer, the one and only, the great one, the great Ezekiel Trezevin. Zeke, great to have you on, bud. Thanks for joining me today.
Hondo, good morning to you. Thank you for having me, man. It's always a pleasure.
We got so much good stuff today. We are going to be all in on the Raiders' defensive line. Now, you were at the SAC Summit at UNLV last week, where Maxx Crosby and seven of his teammates were at, 8 Raiders in total. Von Miller was there. Warren Sapp was there. It's really, someone asked me, how would you describe it? And I said, it's really just where elite pass rushers come together to share secrets, to work together, to get better. What was your observation? It was your first SAC Summit.
Yeah, so the quickest way that, a lot of people around the sack summer were kind of throwing around how to explain it is, it's tight ends basically for defensive ends, just kind of give you a quick idea of what it is. And, it was a good event to be at, a great event to be at, just to be around so many great like-minded people who were there for one reason, and that was to get better and to grab as much information as they could from other people. And it was really cool. Obviously, we go to practice all the time and you see all the different positions practicing, but it was pretty cool. And I'm a little bit biased, don't get me wrong, but it was definitely cool to see all those defensive ends and those defensive linemen just kind of working on their craft together. I was nerding out. I was literally a nerd on the field the other day, so it was pretty cool.
Zeke, one of our listeners emailed and said that they're going to just do a drinking game now for you when you're on the show anytime you mention defensive ends
Hey,
or
listen.
linebackers. I emailed back, you should add linebackers.
Yeah, but listen, I'm shameless when it comes to the linebackers, just because they're so important. But those defensive ends, man, they are special, and what they do is an art. It was cool just to see them work on it, man, and to see honestly so many different levels of defensive ends. You had the Von Millers, the guys that have been in the league for 13, 14, 15 years, the guys like Max who've been in the league for 5 to 7 years, and then they actually had some of the younger guys too who've only been in the league for a year or two, or even some rookies just now coming into the league. So it was fun all the way around.
So Koonce was there and Tyree Wilson. I want to start with those guys. Then we're going to go back and talk about the defensive line in totality. But let's start with Max. One of the things that I admire about him personally, and consider him a friend, but one of the things I admire about him personally is he's always willing to give back. He's always willing to teach. And I think it was cool. He's not only out there doing drills, but he's teaching. What did you notice about him as a teacher?
Listen, him as a teacher, it was even more interesting than to just be able to watch Maxx Crosby play. It's always fun watching him play, but to hear him verbalize how Maxx Crosby does what Maxx Crosby does, that was next level. That was next level. And to see how much he broke it down, how finite he broke down every detail. I didn't even realize it was that much of an art to the defensive end position, as much as I love it. But Max was just breaking it down in the way, and actually he was breaking it down while still physically showing how to do what he was talking about, and that's what made it so much more interesting.
I'm going to give you an observation I have about Max, and maybe I'm too close to the forest that I don't see the tree as a friend, but I'd love your perspective. He's humbled by the respect he gets from the other guys. And I think the more he gets, the more he feels obligated to give back. That's very rare. A lot of guys get respect, they get arrogant. He gets respect, and I think he feels obligated. I think it's a completely different mix. And I think it really shows to his humility and blue collar work ethic.
Yeah, I was going to say, and to answer that point, it shows to his upbringing, right? That's something you can't teach. That's something that you're raised with, that humility. And you're right. When we interviewed Max after the summit, you could tell, he kind of spoke to how, Von Miller was giving him props for years. And the fact that Von Miller, of all people, was giving him props is how much that made him feel like he belonged and how good that made him feel. And like you said, it made him even more humble that somebody on the level of Von Miller at his position was giving him that kind of credit. And you can tell, like you said, the obligation was there, right? It doesn't stop with Maxx Crosby. Maxx Crosby's talent, now he's passing that on to the younger generation.
So I don't think fans, and listen, you and I both have immense respect for Raider Nation. I just don't think fans realize, because they're not there like you and I are, the amount of respect Max gets from his teammates. He talked about, he picked up the phone, invited them, and they're like, where, when, and address. I mean, when he speaks on this team, those players listen, they're attentive. He doesn't have to be, I'm the captain, get your butt there. It's, hey, great, what do you want, bud? I mean, I don't think fans understand how popular he is on his team, but also how much of a leader he is. He's an additional guy on that coaching staff.
Yes, and so and again, to your point, I think another thing that people just in general kind of underestimate is the fact that whenever somebody has the ability to lead and to have people listen to them, that in itself is huge, right? Doesn't matter what business you're in, doesn't matter what field you're in. The ability to have people listen to you is huge. Now, you take that and you move to the NFL, you got to think about how many people can get 50, 60 grown men filled with all that strength to listen to them without even thinking about it. How do you get to that level? You get to that level by hard work and by doing what Maxx has done on the field. So, like you said, he spoke about it the other day at the SAC Summit in terms of no question, right? It was being held in Las Vegas. Maxx said, meet me here. And the guys were there, right? And they showed up in numbers. It speaks to Maxx's, his tenure, what he's done on the field, and how much respect that he gets from his teammates. They love Maxx, they listen to him, and they ride with Maxx for sure.
All right, I'm going to get to a subject that I don't think is dicey, but I think it's very important to dissect.
Okay.
Davante Adams, in my opinion, is the best wide receiver in the NFL. You can say, well, look at his numbers have diminished. Okay. But he's still at over 1,000 yards, over 100 catches. And when you look at the quarterback position in flux, I think you can make a real case. That's the diminishing numbers has nothing to do with him. Has to do with the position that gets him the football and the coaching even more than the position. But he's still in his prime. He's not diminishing, but he's been in the league a long time. He has less years ahead of him than behind him. Maxx Crosby is in his prime, and I still don't think he's a finished product. He doesn't either. And I think he has more years ahead of him than behind him. So when I say this is Maxx's team, it's not a reflection in a negative way at all towards Davante. I mean, those two are the unequivocal leaders. But I think Maxx even has a louder voice, literally and example wise, figuratively, just because of how much he has left. Am I wrong there, Zeke?
So I think there's more to it in terms of why Maxx is more so the leader, and it's very simple. I think it's just because he's been here, right? He was drafted by the team. He's grown here. Davante was Davante by the time he got here, right? So I think the fan base kind of leans a little bit more towards Maxx. I think the team does as well. It's not a knock on Davante by any means. I don't see how anyone. I would hope nobody takes that from us calling or people calling Maxx the leader of the team. Maxx is just he's homegrown. Right, he started as a rookie. He's here now, and he's gone from the bottom really to the top while being with the Raiders. And there's probably not a player on the roster that is more fitting of the Raiders' MO than Maxx. Right, between the tattoos, the attitude, like he fits the persona. That's just what it comes down to. So it's not a knock on Davante, but you look at in terms of historically what the Raiders are about, and Maxx fits. He checks off a lot of those boxes.
All right, let's talk about Tyree. At OTAs and minicamp, he looked different. And I had a player say to me recently, he doesn't even look like the same guy, just a couple weeks removed from mandatory minicamp, and he looked different. You were there, SAC Summit. Give me your take on Tyree. I don't think people are going to recognize him physically.
Locked in. Right. So I don't think we're going to recognize him physically, most people, but there's a chance we might not recognize him mentally either. Just from seeing him on the field, it was, you could just tell there was times where he was so locked in on the drill. Maxx would have to, hey, Tyree, you know what I'm saying? Kind of like bring him back to like, hey, it's okay to like not be as locked in for a quick second, right? He looks like he's ready to go. I've said it about Aiden that he was upset in terms of all the talk he's heard over the offseason. I feel a little bit of the same way about Tyree in terms of all the talk that he heard over the first half of last season. Tyree hasn't forgotten that. He's a large human being. He got even bigger, and I think he's ready to kind of bring the pain this season for sure.
Zeke, this is an important question for me, and Maxx gets a ton of credit from us and others as a leader. I don't think Tyree gets enough credit as a follower. And when you're that high of a draft pick, you make that much kind of money, a lot of those guys come in very arrogant.
Mhm.
The Raiders did a lot of their research. They knew what they were getting in Tyree as far as personality, as far as there's not a lot of ego there. The fact that he's willing to follow and the fact that he's teachable, he's fat, faithful, available, teachable. That to me makes me even more optimistic about Tyree's future than his own talent. I am so impressed with him as a person and a player, all of it. I don't think, again, Max deserves that credit as a leader, but you can't. My dad used to say, a leader without a follower is a guy in a walk. The fact that Tyree follows him, I think, speaks to Tyree's character and integrity. Would you discuss that, please?
Yeah, and his coachability. I mean, I think we could all agree. You come in the league, you don't know what you think you know, right? You have a lot to learn, no matter where you're drafted, right? And the fact that Tyree has kind of come in and said, "Hey, you know what? Let me learn." So I think it's a testament to the Raiders too, right? When they drafted Tyree, they knew, hey, this is going to be a development, right? We're going to have to take our time with them. Everybody was on the same page when Tyree was brought in, right? So I think that helps him kind of bring in the right mentality of, hey, I'm here to learn, especially his first season or two. Then I think I think that first couple 5-6 weeks when he kind of hit the roadblock a little bit, I think that made him even more willing to learn, right? I think he was humbled. Coach Rob Leonard spoke about this. He said, hey, Tyree, like most rookies, when you get drafted top 10, you come in, you kind of sort of think you're that guy. Well, when you're playing on a defensive line, it's a little bit harder to be that guy when you're playing against those guys, right? So he was humbled, and I think that made him kind of go back to the drawing board of, hey, how do I get better? So between him learning, between him being coachable, and Max being someone that you want to listen to, right? He's playing with the perfect person, right? If you're a defensive end and you come to the Raiders and you don't want to listen to Maxx Crosby, you're probably not going to be around for very long. So I think Tyree was wise enough to realize that, and he kind of fell in line a little bit.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. I want to talk about Malcolm Koonce right now because he really flipped the switch once AP took over and Patrick Graham was allowed to do what Patrick Graham wanted to do, which was release the hounds. Um, I have been so impressed with his offseason attitude. It hasn't been an attitude, look what I did. No, it's been, yeah, I did it, but I got to keep it going. His attitude to me is, I was asked recently, should we be so fired up, excited about Malcolm Koonce with what happened last year? To which I responded, and you may disagree, and I want you to if you do. I said, I would be more encouraged by his attitude this offseason than what he did last year, because his attitude this offseason is, I only did it for a half a year. I got to do it some more. I've always loved Malcolm Koonce, the person, and his physical gifts. I love his attitude. He's not come in with a look at me, I've arrived. He's come in with, I still got business. I got something to prove. That's impressed me. How about you?
Yeah, well, just a workman attitude, right? And honestly, if you're just looking at Koonce, if you're just kind of being around him, he almost, you would almost not even know he played so well at the second half of last year. It's almost like he doesn't talk about it. It's almost like he's focused on this year. He really is. Now, he's definitely like, hey, you can tell the monkey's off his back, right? Don't get me wrong, right? The monkey is definitely off his back, but now he's looking at it like, hey, I got to go prove it on a bigger level, on a longer level. He's locked in, just like Tyree is. These guys are focused, right? Those guys that need to have a good season, they're ready to go.
Totally 100% agree with you. All right. I was asked recently uh, to give on a national program, give me a name of a Raider that nobody's talking about that you think they will be at the end of the year. I'm going to tell you who I picked, and I'd love your thoughts on my pick and who you think.
Okay.
I said Janarius Robinson, J Rob. This is a guy that showed some flashes last year. He's a guy, I'm a believer in this young man. The fact that they went out and you don't see them accumulating a ton more tells you what they kind of think. Your thoughts on J Rob? Was I completely wrong? And
No,
who
no,
do
no,
you
not
think's
complete.
that guy? No, go ahead.
Not completely wrong. He just has to, which I'm sure he will. I think the Raiders are going to do a great job in terms of rotating, right, their defensive line, because they're so deep on defensive line, it would make no sense not to rotate them more. So I think if as he starts to get more playing time, J. Rob is definitely going to be one of those guys that you're going to be talking about at the end of the season. I think you're on the right lines for sure.
And you and I are there. These guys are talking about J Rob. I mean, I always love to listen to what guys say.
The
And
players tell
so,
the truth. The
yeah,
players tell the truth, right? In terms of the other players, right? For the most part, they're not gonna sugarcoat it, right? Or they might not say anything overly negative, but they're not gonna all be talking amongst themselves. You hear the chatter, right? That chatter is the truth in terms of the locker room and how the players feel. So when the other players start talking about how good you are and how good you can be, that speaks volumes.
okay. Now, again, we're all defensive line today. I want to talk about Rob Leonard. This is a guy who is a phenomenal defensive line coach. I think he's got a real future in this game as a coordinator. The way he relates to his players, he's extremely demanding like AP and extremely personable like AP. In fact, I told somebody the only difference between him and AP is skin color when it comes to coaching. These guys are the same guy, they're the same mentality. I, I don't ever want, if I'm a Raider fan, I don't ever want Patrick Graham going anywhere. But the reality is, the man should be a head coach in the National Football League. It's ridiculous that he's not. I look at some of these idiots who get jobs, and I'm like, "You're really?" And Patrick Graham didn't. He was very close to getting Seattle. If the Seattle ends up firing this guy and Patrick Graham doesn't have a head coaching job, I'll be stunned if he doesn't get the job. I know Schneider loved him, but Rob Leonard, I think this is a guy as a potential coordinator next. He's a phenomenal coach, great guy, terrific teacher, high energy. I know that you're a big Rob Leonard guy like me. Give me your thoughts on him. And I think he's an unsung hero on this staff.
Without a doubt, an unsung hero. You brought up the word personable, and to kind of piggyback off that, I'm not sure if there's one word for it, but one thing he does well, he's relatable, right? He knows how to coach each player individually, and you could see that with Tyree last year. Rob kind of understood, hey, the way I talk to Maxx and the way I talk to this guy is probably not how I need to talk to this guy right here. So that goes a long way. And he was instrumental in helping Tyree kind of find his way in terms of his first season in the league. Rob is great. The guys love him. Other coaches love him. And like you said, similar to AP, he's loved by everyone. They have a very similar communication style as well. No BS, right? He gets straight to the point. He's effective, right? He's efficient in terms of his teachings, and it speaks volume in terms of how the players speak about him, how the coaches speak about him. They all love him.
You and I were standing next to each other at OTAs when we were over at the defensive line watching the line. And when Rob Leonard jumped Maxx, we both just kind of looked at each other. And the thing is, when your best player wants to be jumped, it tells everybody else, if he's jumping Maxx, he ain't gonna hesitate to jump me. I think that's part of why they love him, because it is, hey, it's on everybody. We're gonna push everybody. He's an equal opportunity coacher. Do you think I'm overstating it, or do you think that's pretty accurate?
It's pretty accurate. It's pretty accurate, and it builds credibility with the team, right? And I think that's for all sports, right? If you're not gonna chastise your best player when they make a mistake, it's hard as a coach to kind of build that credibility with the other players, right? Because you got to think your best player is always going to be your best player. So it's really not necessarily about that player. It's about the people behind him, right? And like you said, when he got on Maxx that day, it's hard for the other guys not to fall in line. So the guys, another thing about Rob is his experience around the league. I think that has brought him so much more credibility with this defensive line as well. He's got experience with a few of the guys on the defensive line, in terms of Christian and a few other guys coaching them previously. That all builds into the credibility that he has as a coach. And like you said, I think the next step for him is going to be a coordinating position.
All right, so now I want to switch directions with you one last time, because I think this one is really important. I think we've given AP a ton of credit on this show, but there's an area of him that we've never discussed, and I'm going to tell you, I did not. The reason we haven't discussed it is I had somebody point it out to me in detail a couple days ago, and even though I had seen it, we'd not discussed it. There's a lot of head coaches that want yes men. There are a lot of head coaches that tell their guys, "You do it the way I want it." He despises yes men. Now, he doesn't want jackasses who just argue because they argue. But he doesn't care if you correct him as long as you have a solution or you have evidence of what you have. I just think the reason he has built such a great staff is because he has empowered his staff to coach their position, to do it well, to speak up. He's given every guy on that staff a voice. That tells you he is very secure in his own skin. We've talked about Philbin, we've talked about Marvin Lewis, and about, hey, that says a lot. He brings those guys in. I did not know this until a couple days ago, and privately, I'll share with you how I found out. But the way he lets his staff coach and gives them a voice, it's why they love him. It's why they believe in him. They're allowed to develop as coaches. He's not hiding them from the media. He's letting them be who they are. I just feel like I have done him a disservice by not talking about that. And Rob Leonard's a great example. Big personality, big coacher. Hey, you're loose. Go do your thing. And you watch him. He's at every position. So he's watching how they coach. But I don't think he gets enough credit. He brings in big spirited, big personalities and lets them do a big job.
So yes, I completely agree with you. And I think this as well. I think, if we take a look back at his, his candidacy for the head coaching position, again, the biggest knock on AP was the lack of coaching experience in terms of professionally. Well, first things first, he got a bunch of other experienced coaches. That was the first step. The second step is you have to let them coach, right? If you're going to go get all that experience, if your biggest knock on me is that I'm not experienced, well, I'm going to go get that experience, and then I'm going to let that experience work for me, right? It's working smarter, not harder, basically, right? So I think it's wise that he, A, knows what he doesn't know, right? And B, he lets those around him that he brought in, that he personally chose to bring in to help him out. He's letting them do what they're supposed to do. So I think that speaks to him as a man. I think that speaks to him as a coach as well. So I think to your point, right, AP knows what he needs to work on. He knows what he's good at, what he's not good at, and he's letting those around him help him out for sure.
Totally agree with you. All right, listen, Zeke, I need you to do me a big favor. I need you to tell everybody how they can find you on X.
Yes, my handle is EZT as in Tom, REZ _SI as in Sports Illustrated. So yes, please follow me.
Get on there, follow Zeke, everybody. He is a great, great follow on Twitter, and he does such a great job working with me. I got to tell you, I'm so proud of him. This is a guy who is a tremendous husband, great father. I can tell you, yeah, I may be his leader, his boss, but he is a great friend and he's a man of integrity. I'm so proud to know him. And I'm so proud that Dexter is going to grow up and Uncle Zeke is a role model and a great guy for him. So follow him on Twitter. It's a great one. We'll see you all tomorrow.